So to start with, let's define some of the symptoms of exhaustion and how you might be feeling these in your daily life, and see how you resonate, whether this is something that you've experienced and whether you're living in this kind of exhausted state now. So I've had this a lot in my past, and I'm talking from personal experience, which is pretty deep on this topic, and I'll go into that in a little bit later. So where does this most commonly pop up for people? Well, in my experience, and it's probably the same for you, is you finish your working day and you feel wound up. And the symptoms that you get with this wound upness is that you're thinking about things that have happened during the day, and it's kind of really distracting you. Sorts of things that distracted me: difficult meetings. Maybe I had like a bit of a combative experience with somebody, or maybe a meeting didn't go as I planned or prepared for. It kind of went on its own route, and I didn't like that. And it really agitated me and took up some energy during that call or that in-person meeting, and left me in a bit of a state. And then the sorts of things that I took away from that into the rest of the evening, once I finished work, this wound up, distracted kind of state of my mind being occupied by these things. And this is what I found with clients I've worked with, is you're typically finding things like you're trying to do basic stuff, like you're trying to cook a meal, and maybe you burn a heap of pasta or some stuff because you're just thinking about something else. You're trying to keep an eye on the hob and you're not there, right? Or you're trying to do three things when you're cooking, but your head's kind of still locked in this world of work. Or maybe it's not work, maybe it's another conversation with a friend or a family member that's occupying your mind. But you're wound up because you've burned a lot of energy on work. So these other conversations that you've got coming, or you've just had, are still there in your head, and it's all just getting a bit tied up and knotty and circulating over and over and over and over again. And work is making this worse, or contributing, or causing these conversations. And this kind of inability to focus kind of becomes a thing where you basically just can't do basics. Like simple things get pushed out of the way, pushed out of your ability to attend to them. So for example, do you commonly find yourself skipping calling your friends, or skipping calling your family? Or maybe you just don't feel up for doing things that are healthy for you, that you know you can and want to do when you're in a better state. Like, for example, going to the gym. Maybe you want to go to the gym and you've committed in your mind you're going to go like a couple of times a week or whatever. Or maybe you're going to go to a class, or you're going to take a walk, or you're going to go for a run. And each time you come to do it at the end of your day, or whenever you plan to do it, you just don't have the energy for it, and you park it and you think, I'll do it another day when I feel better. So these are common, like, basic things, right? Where you want to attend to family, friends, home, health, and you try to do them, you plan to do them, and they just keep failing to happen because whenever you come to do them, you don't have the energy. You don't have the energy. This is exhaustion. This is exhaustion. And that is typically the root cause for skipping a lot of those things. And there are other things that can contribute, particularly for introverts, and can make this worse and push them to even be less likely to happen, on top of the energy problem, the exhaustion problem. But these are some typical things. And then some other typical things that you'll see happening when you're in this exhausted state as alternatives to doing those things that you should do, or you want to do, that your best self would do. These alternatives that you pursue typically look like what? Binge drinking, or drinking a bit at least every night, just to feel a bit more relaxed and calm and reduce that kind of mental kind of overload of stuff going on and that wound up thing. And maybe that's not drinking for you. Maybe the thing you're binging on is food. Maybe you're Maybe you're eating badly and lots of stuff badly because that's your go-to escapism when your brain is just sapped of all its positive energy when you're in that exhausted state. Or maybe it's both those things and more. Maybe it's also sitting around watching a lot of junk TV when you know you couldn't do something better for your long-term self, but that's all you've got capacity to do. And when I say this, I don't say this to belittle or demean people that do these things. I say this when you, in your mind, in your personal decision making, you want to be something different to that. So if you don't want to be something different to that, if you want to be that person, then that's your decision. That's your personal identity. And I have no issue with those people or with people that wish to live that way. My support and guidance is for those that want to be something better, that know they're capable of something better, that desire that different state and see these symptoms, know there's kind of something not right, but don't quite know why. Well, I'm telling you, if you have these symptoms, it's probably exhaustion. It's almost certainly exhaustion to some extent, if not entirely caused by exhaustion. Where do I know all this from? Well, certainly I've had lots of clients where I've worked with them on these topics, but also from a very deep place of personal experience. I'm a 15 years experienced technology leader, and I've worked and managed with many people and managed employees who've had these issues and worked with other colleagues who've had these challenges in my domain. And I think it's particularly pronounced amongst people that are technology professionals. Why? Because a lot of us are introverts. A lot of us are doing quite cognitively heavy work, and it can lead to these symptoms that I've described, and people often part them and don't really deal with them. And I did that for a long time. I just thought it was kind of normal to feel like that before I recognized that I was in a continual state of exhaustion. So that's really what I wanted to talk about on this part of the video. I hope that's helped so far to understand what exhaustion means, and if you have the symptoms, perhaps you have one, perhaps you have many. On the next thing, I'm going to talk to you about why you suffer with this exhaustion. What are the causes, before we can then talk about how do we solve some of this stuff, how do we address some of these root causes. What are the causes of exhaustion? So the cause of exhaustion kind of needs simplifying in and of itself. The cause of exhaustion is lack of energy. Lack of energy. Let me drill that in for you. Lack of energy. Why do we get a lack of energy? Well, that takes us somewhere really interesting and quite complicated. As an introvert, the easiest way I can describe this for you is to try to make an analogy. And we're complex beings as humans, so an analogy isn't perfect, but it's the best I can come up with right now, which is that your brain is like an engine. Your brain's like an engine. What does an engine need to operate effectively? An engine needs fuel to operate effectively. And why does it need fuel? Because you want to put it into operation. You want to put it into use. You want to press that accelerator. You want to drive that engine. You make use of your brain, of your cognitive abilities. Doing that consumes energy, consumes fuel. And as an introvert, you are the owner of an exceptionally special kind of engine, which is kind of like a Ferrari. So you've got a great tool under the hood there that's very powerful. But here's the rub, here's the complicating factor. That engine is highly sensitive. It's a very special kind of engine, and certain conditions are going to make that engine burn through fuel very, very fast, that is going to leave you feeling very exhausted, leaving you feeling like you have an empty tank and causing the symptoms I've described in other videos. So imagine you've got that Ferrari and you take it for a drive on a race course that's full of hairpin bends. You're going to burn through that fuel real quick, right? What is that situation for an introverted brain of an engine? That situation is social engagement, particularly group settings. And those group settings are going to burn that fuel that you have very quickly, particularly when you are meeting with people you're less familiar with. So if there's several people you don't know, that's going to burn the energy really fast. If it's a couple of people you know really well, that won't burn the energy as fast. Why? Well, it comes back to that stimuli question. What is it that's highly stimulating to your introverted brain? It's kind of unfamiliarity. It's kind of like threat detection. It's trying to pick up on lots of quite complicated personal cues, like interpersonal cues, like facial expression, tone of voice, and it's trying to do a good job of that. But it's taking quite a lot of cognitive effort to do that. So it burns the energy really quick. It goes from here to here really quick. So that's what your introverted brain is doing. It's doing that particularly with unfamiliar people. It's doing that particularly with groups, because there's lots of millions, frankly, of tiny little stimuli being received, and your brain is trying to pick up on from all those different people. If you're with a lot of very familiar people, this will feel less pronounced. So if you're an introvert, you'll probably feel quite comfortable actually in a group of 3 or 4 people that you've known ever since you were at school or something. So this is a thing that people struggle to get their head around. Why is it I'm good with some groups and not others? What's the cause? Well, it's the stimuli detection thing. It's threat detection. It's your brain trying to read and be smart really in what it's doing, but it's burning a lot of energy doing it. So highly sensitive group meetings, therefore, are going to cost you a lot of energy. And this is a thing for you as a tech professional or an introvert to think about, is group meetings are really going to burn that energy. Back-to-back group meetings are going to absolutely crush your energy very, very quickly. New people that you haven't met before, particularly in groups, that's going to really sap the energy. You hear classic anecdotes around this stuff from people. Like, introverts don't like to do introducing themselves to a group. There's why. I've explained just now why that is. It's for that reason. We know from experience we're going to find that very energy intensive. We're going to find it very stimulating. It's going to really agitate our brain doing that because of the sheer magnitude of stimuli we're going to try to interpret when we're performing that exercise. And this is why I believe a lot of introverts find the concept of public speaking to be particularly scary, is because some of these root causes. This might take you to a place that I want to discourage you from going, which is maybe the answer here is I just don't engage with people. The perfect life for me is to live on the top of a mountain, to to live in a forest many thousands of miles from people, to kind of self-isolate, right? And I think a lot of introverts do this too. Some very famous introverts who've produced incredible works of masterpieces have done this. So there is that upside to it, that it gives you this ability to create in a certain way. But what you're going to find if you live like that is you're going to find the reverse problem, right? So now go back to that Ferrari analogy for me for a second. You're the owner of this Ferrari. You know it's got this incredible power, this accelerator you can just press on. You can take it for a spin on those wild roads of Monte Carlo. You know it's going to burn a lot of energy, but heck, it's going to be a bit of fun for a while, right? You're going to have a bit of fun for a period there because of the thrill, the excitement, the unfamiliarity. Well, it's a bit like that with people, right? You know deep down that you kind of want some social engagement, and maybe you want to meet some new people and make some new friends, and maybe you don't want to feel like that's a threatening thing to do or something to worry about. Well, you don't have to. And doing that, isolating yourself in that way, will cut yourself off from that kind of experience, and all that will cause is another kind of problem, which is knowing you've got that Ferrari, knowing you could take it for a spin but never doing it, and knowing you've got that mind that's capable of having that thrill, having that fun, having that adventure for a bit. And if you don't ever do that, if you don't meet people, if you don't put yourself out there in that way, it's going to cause a different kind of problem, which is an exhaustion. Of course, if you isolate yourself, you're not going to suffer from exhaustion. You're going to suffer from something different. You're going to suffer from anxiety. And the anxiety will come from the place of knowing that you do want to engage with people, because we're all social creatures to some extent. No man is an island. You're going to know that, and it's going to cause anxiety because you're not doing something that you know you're capable of, and that you know will bring you some kind of reward, a different kind of reward, which is the reward one gets from social interaction. So we want the reward, but it costs us energy. So this puts us in a complex dilemma, and that dilemma is, how do I address my energy needs? How do I address the cause of exhaustion in such a way that I'm able to live a more full and engaging life, including a social life? So in this video, I'm going to talk about energy management for introverted tech professionals, and I'm going to be pretty simplistic, and I'm going to cut to the chase on it. So I'm going to have to eliminate talking about some of the broader aspects to energy management. So just bear with me. I can't fit in everything into this piece of content. I'm just going to cover what I can in the short time I have you with me. Energy management for introverts is like energy management for anyone else, in the sense that it is about fuel in and fuel out. Fuel in and fuel out. And I've talked about this analogy before, of your introverted brain being like an engine that consumes fuel and spends fuel, but also has fuel topped up into it. Well, let's talk about how you top up your fuel and what's really important for topping up and maintaining that fuel at a good rate. And it's pretty fundamental. It is things like, number one, sleep. How are you sleeping? And yes, this matters, and yes, we have to talk about it, even if you think it's really basic and really obvious and dumb. I'm going to speak about it because it's so absolutely critical. You cannot live an effective life, in my opinion, without maintaining a decent sleep habit. And as an introvert, this is particularly important because, as I've already talked about in other videos, your brain's like a Ferrari of an engine. It expends energy really quickly. That battery gets drained very fast by things that you commonly encounter in life, like social engagements with unfamiliar people. So we've got to keep our energy topped up, so we have to sleep a lot. 7.5 hours to 8 hours. 8 hours, brilliant if you could do it. 7.5, very good if you could do it. If you do not consistently get that amount of sleep, you're going to hit those problems I've talked about in terms of exhaustion symptoms. You're going to hit things like feeling wrecked. You're going to hit things like feeling irritable. You're going to have symptoms such as skipping meeting with your friends, skipping doing things that are healthy, because you're not going to have the energy to do that. So you must sleep effectively. A couple of tips for good sleep, apart from sleeping the right number of hours, are things like consistency in your pattern of sleep. There's something that you can go and look up if you want to, called a circadian rhythm. Your rhythm of sleep gets set through your habit, and the habit should be a consistent go to sleep time and a consistent waking time. So you build that habit that your body knows when it's getting ready for sleep and knows when it's going to come rouse out of sleep. What that causes is your sleep quality to dramatically increase. So you'll find things like your deep sleep and rapid eye movement, REM, which is dreaming, both of which you need, will increase to the right natural level your body needs if you have consistent go to bed time, get up time. So set the alarm clock, wake up consistently, but also set an alarm clock for when you're going to go to bed because you need those things in consistency of sleep to get a good sleep habit. If you do want to build this, I recommend you plug in these kind of actions into the next coming 7 days and try to get used to it, build the right habit, and then try to persist that habit for 30 days. Then it tends to stick and you'll quite quickly see an improvement in the quality of sleep if you do things like consistent bedtime and wake time, which will improve your energy. Other things that are necessary for energy are pretty obvious too. Food. You must eat, but you must eat the right things. Your introverted nature means you're going to burn through your brain's stimulated natural tendency. You're going to burn through calories very quickly. You're going to burn through energy very quickly, particularly when you're doing those socially draining things. And the kind of things that help here are eating things that are not necessarily like fast carbs, like cereals, sugary snacks, chocolate bars, biscuits, bread, these common things in our diet that a lot of us consume and a lot of us consume a great amount of are fast carbs. They burn very quickly, and what happens is you suddenly find yourself in an energy depleted state before you know it, and that's because your stomach's not got what it needs in it, that it doesn't have something slow to process. What helps here is having a diet that's full of things like fibers and proteins. So fruit and veg, obviously, but also kind of slow burning proteins are helpful here too. So they're not just good for like gut health and diet and nutrition, but they're also good for your energy needs. A very common problem I see amongst introverts, and the reason I labour this, is a lot of us don't have whilst we have very good cognitive capability up here, interoception, which is our understanding of what's happening in the body, is not so great. So we don't listen to these signals as brilliantly, and that can be a cause of us getting hungry and not realising it, having low energy and not realising it, because we're not listening to the body signals as well as we are labouring what's going on in our head, which is doing cognitively heavy things. So food matters, sleep matters, fuel in matters. Another form of fuel in, which is very specific to introverts, is taking alone time. As I've said in other videos, you don't need days and weeks alone. You don't need to go to the top of the mountain or to the middle of the forest to be alone for that amount of time to get recharged. You don't need that. You just need adequate breaks. That can be as little as half an hour or an hour. And if I have a busy day of lots of meetings, I'm definitely going to be looking for that hour in the middle of the day around lunch to recharge, because that will rest my overly stimulated brain for a little while and is quite regenerative in terms of refueling me and readies me for another bit of kind of action in the latter part of the day. Another thing that really helps, which is similar in its effect, and an important one for introverts, is mindfulness and meditation. The reason I say mindfulness is because I don't necessarily see the need for people to sit down in a lotus position, like quietly meditating, eyes closed, classic meditative states. There's nothing wrong with that. That really works. But you don't need to do that to access the benefit that you get from mindfulness. The benefit you get from mindfulness is resting that very stimulated, energized burning fuel brain, resting it for a little. Think away from maybe engine for a moment towards muscle. What happens if you use a muscle continuously? It gets strained, doesn't it? It gets strained, you get hurt, you get injured. This is kind of, I see what happens to an introverted brain if we spend too much time in the cognitive space where you're overthinking things and not enough time calming the mind, relaxing the mind, which is what mindfulness and meditation brings you. Simple tips to access a state of mindfulness if you don't know them. Try to think about getting in touch with your senses. So if I'm in a slightly agitated state and I notice my anxious brain kicking in, cognitive overload kicking in, I'll do things like I'll get in touch with my senses by just paying attention to the feeling of my skin, just doing that with my fingers, or just touching the fabric on a chair that I'm sitting on, or feeling like the clothing that I'm wearing. Paying attention to the feelings of things will take you into a state of mindfulness and awareness that's outside of here and into the senses. And you can do this at any time, any place. Doesn't have to be for hours, doesn't need to be 10, 20 minutes. If you do it for like 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes, that will really help to rest your mind for a bit. If you can squeeze in bigger chunks of mindfulness, bigger chunks of meditation, better still. I only say these simple things because I know a lot of people find carving out the time a bit hard. So start with simple, easier, quicker steps, because that's more likely to happen, isn't it? Finally, I think like turning into the fuel out piece. That's fuel in, right? So you've got sleep, you've got food, you've got breaks, you've got mindfulness and meditation. These all help massively. If you do all of these things, you will dramatically improve the amount of energy you have available to spend, and it will be there consistently and sustainably if you do these practices and build habits around these practices. Turning to fuel out, you want to pay attention to that too. How do you pay attention to that? Well, I've talked already about these things, but big meetings are going to burn your energy. Unfamiliar people are going to burn your energy particularly fast. Prefer, therefore, things like one-to-ones with people. That's a lot less cognitively heavy, a lot less energy draining, energy sapping for an introvert. So go to those one-to-ones where you can, and prefer those over group meetings if you can. You can't entirely avoid group meetings as a tech professional, right? You just want to reduce and minimize them where you can. If you have to attend them and you're feeling low energy, brilliant techniques to use that have worked for me and clients time and time again are things like moving out of that state of thinking I need to have combat and contribute a lot of like input. I need to speak a lot, present a lot, win dialogue. Think less like that when you're in those meetings, particularly group meetings. Think more about how you can play a different role that respects your introverted nature. Think more about a role where you are the listener. A lot of times, a meeting will benefit from somebody who's good at listening. And sometimes that listener, all they need to do is play back what they've heard to be a very productive person in that meeting. So I heard you say this. Is that right? I think the action I just heard there was this. Does that sound like the right? Did I understand that correctly? People will find this very helpful and like you for this. Another thing you can do is just that. Ask questions. Just ask open questions. Doing these things is a lot less cognitively heavy because you're not thinking in such an anxious way about having to say something great or clever or win the debate or push a point. All you're doing is asking a question, right? All you're doing is listening and playing back, right? So these things are more relaxing, less demanding things on the introverted mind than being the person that has to kind of take control. You don't need to always be the person that takes control. So these are just a few short, sharp tips really on how to manage your energy effectively as an introvert. I hope you found them useful. Please, please, please reach out to me if you have any questions Or better still, if you have anything you thought of that helped you, I would love to hear about it. I hope this has been useful to you, and I will speak to you again soon.